Chapter 1. First Impressions of the Death World. Varric tightened her grip on the railing, her gaze fixed on the planet below as the shuttle descended through thick clouds. Earth. She'd heard the tales, the whispers passed from diplomat to diplomat about the Death World and the reckless species that thrived on it. But nothing had prepared her for the reality. A violent rumble shook the vessel, jolting her from her thoughts. Lightning sliced through the sky just beyond the window, illuminating a vast, tumultuous landscape, a world of raw, untamed elements that threatened to tear her calm away. As the shuttle finally landed, her translator pinged with a message. Asterisk, welcome to Earth. Asterisk, steeling herself, Varric exited, her boots sinking slightly into the wet earth beneath her. The air felt heavy, thick with moisture and tinged with unfamiliar scents, damp soil, vegetation, and a strange mineral sharpness she couldn't quite place. Just ahead, a tall human stood waiting, his posture relaxed despite the rain hammering down around them. He raised a hand in greeting, undeterred by the storm. Ethan Clark, he introduced himself, a warm grin on his face. Welcome to Earth. Sorry about the weather. You landed during one of our mild storms. Varric glanced up as a flash of lightning cracked the sky, followed by a deep, rolling rumble that seemed to vibrate through her entire body. She barely contained a shiver. This is considered mild? She asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Ethan chuckled, motioning for her to follow him toward a nearby vehicle. Oh, definitely. This is just nature's way of saying hello. Trust me, you'll get used to it. He opened the vehicle door for her and climbed into the driver's seat, the rain pattering loudly on the metal roof as they settled inside. The ride through the city was unlike anything Varric had ever experienced. Streets thrived with people braving the downpour, moving with umbrellas and hoods, chatting, laughing, seemingly oblivious to the storm. Buildings rose like rugged monoliths, their lights gleaming through the murkiness. A stray flash of lightning illuminated the wet roads, casting fleeting, eerie shadows. Varric watched in stunned silence, feeling as if she'd stepped into an alien landscape. Are all humans so indifferent to the chaos around them? She asked eventually, glancing at Ethan, whose eyes were fixed on the road ahead. We're not indifferent, he replied, his voice calm. We've just learned to live with it. Earth doesn't hand out guarantees. It demands that you adapt. It's not about conquering the elements. It's about coexisting with them. He paused, glancing over with a grin. Most of us think it makes life a little more interesting. Varric absorbed his words, glancing back out at the rain-streaked windows. On my world, we control our environment. Everything is stable. Predictable. Predictable, huh? Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Sounds safe. Is that such a bad thing? Varric challenged, her expression skeptical. I can't imagine anyone willingly subjecting themselves to this level of risk. Isn't that reckless? Ethan's eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief. Reckless, or maybe just resilient? He made a sharp turn, guiding the vehicle up a steep road that overlooked the city. The rain had lightened slightly, giving her a better view of the skyline, where distant storms rolled across the horizon, casting a surreal, almost apocalyptic glow. I'll show you something. Might help you understand. They parked at the edge of a hillside that provided a sweeping view of the city, drenched in rain and framed by dark, churning clouds. The storm had moved on, leaving behind a mist that hung low, clinging to the ground like a ghostly veil. Ethan gestured toward the city below. Look closely. What do you see? Varric hesitated, scanning the scene. To her, it looked chaotic, a writhing city bathed in shadows and sporadic light, nothing like the organized, pristine landscapes of her own world. But then, beneath the shadows and dim glow of streetlights, she noticed clusters of people moving, helping each other in the aftermath of the storm. Emergency lights flickered, illuminating figures working together to clear debris from roads, offering aid to each other with an ease that suggested this was routine. Humans helping each other, she murmured, half to herself. Exactly, Ethan said, his voice quiet. Earth is unpredictable, but it's what drives us to adapt, to innovate, to connect with one another. We're stronger because of the challenges we face, not despite them. For a moment, Varric was silent, watching as a group of humans navigated through pooling water and down branches with a strange mix of calm and purpose. "And this is how your people survive here? By embracing the chaos?" Ethan nodded. "Yes. It's not just survival, it's growth. Each challenge teaches us something new, makes us more adaptable. Humanity's story is one of resilience." Varric couldn't shake the feeling of awe creeping into her chest. Back on her world, they had perfected order. Safety was paramount, risk minimized to the point that even minor natural variations were suppressed. The very concept of welcoming danger, of thriving amid constant uncertainty, felt almost exhilarating. But she kept her voice neutral. "It seems a dangerous way to live." Ethan chuckled again, glancing out over the city. "Maybe, but there's a freedom in it too. A kind of strength that only comes from embracing uncertainty." His gaze softened, a hint of pride flickering across his face. "And in a way, that's what makes us human." As the rain eased, the mist began to lift, revealing more of the city sprawled beneath them. Varric could see the humans moving like rivers, flowing through obstacles, resilient in ways she was only beginning to comprehend. The intensity of the experience left her quiet, pondering her initial impression of Earth. As the lights of the city blinked against the dimming storm, she glanced at Ethan, a newfound respect stirring within her. "Perhaps," she murmured almost to herself, "I misjudged this place." Ethan's smile was faint but knowing. "Just wait," he said softly. "Earth has a way of surprising people." With that, they climbed back into the vehicle, Varric glancing back at the city, the rain, the untamed landscape that surrounded it. In that moment, she felt both unnerved and strangely alive, as if standing on the edge of something vast and unpredictable. And perhaps, for the first time, she wondered what it would be like to call a death world home. Chapter 2, Tested by Fire and Storm. Varric was beginning to understand Earth's reputation as a death world. The hours since her arrival had already felt like a lifetime, each new experience an assault on her senses. She was unaccustomed to such intensity, to a place where the environment itself seemed eager to challenge anyone who dared walk its surface. Ethan's vehicle sped down the soaked city streets, the headlights slicing through the remnants of mist and casting long, eerie shadows over the pavements. A sense of foreboding tugged at Varric, though she couldn't pinpoint why. "Where are we headed?" she asked, her voice tight. "To see a bit of Earth's unpredictability up close," Ethan replied, his tone steady yet unreadable. "There's a site nearby that I think you'll find interesting. It should give you some insight into what makes us who we are." The vehicle slowed as they approached the outskirts of the city, where civilization gave way to dense forest, tall trees stretching into the twilight sky. The rain had stopped, but the smell of damp earth lingered, mingling with an underlying scent of pine and wildness. Varric breathed deeply, feeling both anxious and strangely exhilarated by the raw, untamed energy of this world. They parked near a clearing, the ground uneven and littered with fallen branches. Varric's gaze darted around, taking in the shadows that seemed to shift with each flicker of light from Ethan's flashlight. Her senses were on high alert, as if every sound, every breath of wind, was a potential threat. "What are we here to see?" she asked, trying to mask her unease. Ethan pointed through the trees, where a faint orange glow pulsed against the darkening sky. "There," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "That's our destination." As they made their way toward the glow, Varric became aware of an intense heat pressing against her skin, growing stronger with each step. The smell of smoke filled the air, sharp and acrid, mingling with the earthy aroma of burning wood. The source became clear as they emerged from the forest, a wildfire, fierce and consuming, stretching across a hillside, licking hungrily at the trees and underbrush. Her eyes widened, a pang of alarm shooting through her. This is dangerous. We should retreat. There's no control over this." Ethan merely shook his head, his gaze fixed on the flames. "This is how our forests renew themselves, Varric. It's brutal, but it's natural. The fire clears away the old, making space for new growth. He gestured to a group of humans in yellow suits nearby, moving quickly but with practiced ease as they worked to contain the blaze. And we're not just letting it burn. See? We adapt. We fight it. Varric watched in astonishment as the humans maneuvered around the fire, coordinating with a precision she hadn't expected. They used hoses and tools, cutting lines through the underbrush, even setting controlled burns to limit the spread. Each movement seemed synchronized, their expressions calm and focused despite the immense risk. Why would they willingly put themselves in harm's way? Varric asked, struggling to understand. Isn't it easier to avoid places like this? It would be easier, Ethan replied, his gaze still fixed on the firefighters. But then we'd lose so much. The forests, the ecosystems, everything that makes Earth what it is. It's part of our nature to protect, even when it's dangerous. He glanced at her, a spark of determination in his eyes. We don't run from hardship. We face it. The fire crackled and roared, its heat now palpable, radiating against Varric's skin. She felt a strange mix of fear and admiration as she watched the humans continue their work, undeterred by the flames threatening to consume everything around them. A sudden shift in the wind sent a burst of embers into the air, scattering dangerously close to where they stood. Varric instinctively stepped back, her heart pounding, but Ethan remained rooted, his expression resolute. "Are you not afraid?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Of course I am, but fear's just part of the equation. It doesn't stop us. It drives us forward." He turned to face her, his gaze unwavering. "Fear makes us more careful, but it also makes us braver." Varric felt a surge of respect for him, for all of them. She had always thought of her own kind as disciplined, logical, and resilient, but here, she was witnessing a different kind of strength, one born from coexistence with chaos and uncertainty, rather than control. She felt as though she were seeing humanity for the first time, understanding the qualities that made them unique. One of the firefighters approached, his suit smeared with soot, sweat trickling down his face despite the cool night air. He nodded at Ethan, his expression weary yet resolute. "Area's contained," he said, his voice rough but satisfied. "We'll be monitoring for flare-ups, but the worst is over." Ethan clapped the man on the shoulder, nodding with a shared respect. "Good work, Tom. This place will be lush again in no time." The firefighter gave Varric a quick, curious glance, then disappeared back into the haze, leaving her with an image of humanity she wouldn't soon forget. As they made their way back to the vehicle, Varric felt a new weight on her shoulders, a dawning realization about the complexities of Earth and its people. Humans didn't just survive here. They thrived, embraced the planet's unforgiving nature, and found purpose in it. There was a freedom in their resilience, a willingness to face danger head-on and emerge stronger for it. When they were seated in the vehicle again, Ethan turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "Still think we're reckless?" Varric hesitated, her mind racing with the images she'd just witnessed. "I think," she began slowly, choosing her words carefully, "I think you have a strength unlike any I've ever known. One that doesn't come from eliminating risk, but from embracing it." Ethan's smile was faint, his gaze filled with a quiet pride. "You're beginning to understand." As they drove away from the smoldering forest, Varric stared out the window, her thoughts turbulent. The wild landscape, the people who risked their lives to protect it, the willingness to face danger for the sake of something greater. It all lingered in her mind, altering her perception of this so-called death world and the creatures who called it home. And as the city lights reappeared on the horizon, Varric couldn't help but wonder what other revelations this world held, waiting patiently for her to uncover them. Chapter 3. They drove into the heart of the city as evening settled in, the horizon painted in shades of amber and violet. Varric watched the urban landscape unfold before her, a chaotic maze of towering buildings and crowded streets, bustling with life despite the growing darkness. This world never seemed to sleep, its energy pulsing at all hours. The humans around her moved with purpose, as if they were all pieces of a massive, intricate machine. She could feel the hum of their resolve, and it stirred something within her, something she couldn't quite name. Ethan guided the vehicle to a stop in front of a large structure with a glowing sign that read Research Center. He glanced at her, a hint of excitement gleaming in his eyes. "This," he said, "is where things get interesting. If you thought a fire was intense, you haven't seen anything yet." Varric raised a brow, intrigued but cautious. "What exactly are we doing here?" Ethan chuckled. "You'll see soon enough. We're meeting Dr. Chun, one of Earth's leading researchers in extreme environments. She's a bit of a legend around here." As they stepped into the building, the sterile scent of disinfectant and metal greeted Varric. Unlike the chaotic city outside, the interior of the research center was calm and orderly. Scientists in white lab coats moved purposefully, their faces lit by the glow of computer screens and equipment she barely recognized. They wound their way through a series of hallways before arriving at a lab filled with complex machinery, some whirring quietly, others humming with barely restrained power. A woman with a sharp, focused gaze stood at the center of it all, hands on her hips, inspecting a digital display. "Dr. Chun," Ethan called, and the woman turned, her face brightening as she saw him. "Ethan," she greeted him warmly, then gave Varric a curious once-over. "And you must be Varric. I've heard quite a bit about you." Varric inclined her head, uncertain of how to respond. "I am pleased to meet you," she replied, her voice polite but wary. Dr. Chen's smile softened, as if sensing Varric's unease. "Welcome to Earth's little corner of controlled chaos," she said, gesturing around the lab. "Here, we study everything from deep-sea pressures to solar radiation, trying to understand how living beings survive and even thrive in the harshest conditions." "Which I imagine might sound familiar to you." Varric nodded slowly. "Yes, though, from what I've seen, humans thrive in these conditions by choice. My people would consider that reckless." "Perhaps," Dr. Chin agreed, a glint of pride in her eyes. "But that's what drives us. We don't just accept the world as it is. We push it, reshape it. And tonight, we're conducting a little experiment that might interest you." Curiosity and a tinge of apprehension twisted within Varric. "What kind of experiment?" Dr. Chin led them to a thick, reinforced glass window that overlooked a chamber beyond. Inside was a dense, hostile environment that reminded Varric of the hottest, most volatile planets she'd encountered in her studies. Flickers of blue and white lightning arced across the chamber, and the air seemed to shimmer with heat. "We're simulating the atmosphere of Venus," Dr. Chin explained. "Temperatures soared to nearly 900 degrees Fahrenheit, and the pressure is almost 100 times that of Earth's. We've designed a small probe that we believe can withstand it, and tonight we're testing it for the first time." Varric's eyes widened as she took in the setup. The equipment looked fragile against the crushing conditions they were attempting to simulate. "And you believe this probe will survive?" Dr. Chin nodded, her expression both excited and resolute. "We've tested materials and designs from dozens of disciplines, and I'm confident we've found the right combination. But it's the first real test. Nothing can fully prepare us for what we'll encounter." Varric felt a familiar skepticism rise. "And if it fails?" Dr. Chin shrugged, her smile unfazed. "Then we learn, adapt, and try again. That's the essence of human progress. Failures are just as important as successes." There it was again, that fearless resolve that seemed to pulse at the heart of every human endeavor. Varric watched as the probe was lowered into the chamber, her own nerves taut as the test commenced. The room around them dimmed as the chamber's atmosphere intensified, the heat and pressure building to monstrous levels. Varric could feel the raw power radiating from behind the glass, the relentless fury that could obliterate anything unprepared for it. Her gaze flickered to Dr. Chun and Ethan, both watching the monitor with a mixture of hope and tension. Seconds ticked by, then minutes. The probe was still intact, holding strong against the crushing heat and pressure, and a murmur of approval rippled through the lab. But just as relief began to settle, a loud alarm shattered the silence. The probe trembled, its frame buckling under the unrelenting force within the chamber. Varric felt her heart race, her hands clenching involuntarily as she watched. "Hold steady," Dr. Chen muttered to herself, her eyes glued to the screen. The monitor showed data spikes as the probe struggled, pushing its materials to their absolute limits. For a moment, it seemed as though it might hold, a symbol of humanity's tenacity in the face of insurmountable odds. But then, with a final, violent shudder, the probe collapsed, crushed by the forces it had dared to challenge. The room fell silent, the failure heavy in the air. Dr. Chen exhaled slowly, disappointment flickering across her face before she straightened, her gaze sharpening. "Well," she said, her tone surprisingly light. Back to the drawing board. Varric turned to her, stunned. "You don't feel defeated?" Dr. Chen shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Defeat isn't in the failure, Varric. It's in giving up. This tells us what we need to improve, how we can be stronger next time. We knew it was a risk, but that's what makes the success worth pursuing." Varric absorbed her words, a new respect blooming within her. In her culture, failures were meticulously avoided, seen as signs of weakness or poor planning. But here, on this volatile world, humans embrace them as part of the journey, stepping stones to eventual triumph. As they left the lab, Varric glanced at Ethan, her voice thoughtful. "I think I'm beginning to understand why your kind calls Earth a death world, and why you choose to stay here. There's something in your nature, something I think my people could learn from." Ethan's eyes gleamed with quiet pride. "Maybe so, but remember, you're part of this too, Varric. We face challenges together now." She nodded, feeling a profound shift within her. The idea of failure, of facing challenges head-on rather than sidestepping them, stirred her in a way she hadn't anticipated. Earth's people were more than survivors. They were pioneers, explorers in a world that demanded resilience, and Varric was beginning to feel herself drawn into that spirit. And for the first time, she wondered what it would mean to face the universe alongside them, to embrace this challenging, exhilarating life, and the countless unknowns it promised. Chapter 4. Embracing the Unknown. Varric stood on the observation deck, watching the Earth turn beneath her as the stars began to emerge in the twilight. The view held her in awe. The planet she'd once seen as volatile and treacherous now seemed alive, pulsing with resilience and promise. She could almost feel its heartbeat, a hum of determination that seemed to mirror her own. Ethan joined her, carrying a small data pad. His expression was one of quiet intensity, the kind she'd come to recognize in humans when facing something uncertain but vital. "They've made the adjustments to the probe," he said, holding the data pad out for her to see. "Dr. Chun thinks we've got a good chance this time." Varric scanned the updated blueprints, noting the modifications designed to strengthen the probe against unimaginable heat and pressure. She could feel the weight of their efforts, the culmination of failure and resolve. Each line of data, each adjustment, spoke of the sheer determination that Earth scientists poured into their work. "They really don't give up, do they?" she murmured, half to herself. Ethan smiled. "It's a bit of a human specialty. That, and never backing down from a challenge." Varric looked up, meeting his gaze. "This isn't something my people understand. We avoid risk at all costs to ensure survival." He nodded, leaning against the railing. "I get that, but sometimes if you don't push the boundaries, you never really find out what's possible. That's why we do this. Not because it's safe, but because of what it could lead to." The conviction in his voice struck something deep within her. It was an alien concept, yet one she felt herself drawn to with every encounter on this death world. Here, survival wasn't just about endurance. It was about adapting, about daring to explore the unknown. Just then, a voice came over the intercom, breaking the quiet. "Ethan, Varric, we're ready for the test. Join us in the lab." They exchanged a glance, anticipation flickering in their eyes, and made their way down to the research center. The lab was buzzing with a cautious excitement as they entered. Researchers and engineers clustered around various monitors, the probe gleaming under the chamber lights like a beacon of their collective effort. Dr. Chun was at the center of it all, her gaze sharp and focused as she made final adjustments. "Good, you're here," she said without looking up. "We're just about to start." Varric felt her pulse quicken as they took their places behind the reinforced glass. The atmosphere in the room was thick with anticipation, as if each scientist and engineer was holding their breath. Beginning atmospheric simulation, one of the technicians announced, and the chamber began to hum, pressure and temperature steadily increasing to mimic the harsh conditions of Venus. The probe settled into place, its outer casing gleaming under the intensifying heat, seemingly braced for the onslaught it was about to face. Varric watched as it held, her hands gripping the edge of the console. The heat level soared, and the probe trembled but remained intact, its reinforced casing standing firm. Dr. Chen's hands hovered over the controls, her focus absolute. Then, as if to test their resolve, a spike in pressure rattled the chamber, causing the probe to shudder violently. Varric's breath caught, a part of her expecting it to fail. But the probe endured, withstanding the pressure with a resilience she hadn't expected. Dr. Chen's voice broke the silence. Look at the readouts. Holding steady at maximum parameters. It's working. The room erupted in a subdued cheer, cautious but hopeful. Varric felt a surge of admiration. The probe was a testament to their determination, each failure building to this moment. Yet, even as relief flooded the lab, a sudden alert blared across the console. Pressure spike detected. Beyond expected levels, a technician called out, his voice tight with worry. Varric's eyes flicked to Ethan. Can it withstand that? We're about to find out, he replied, his voice steady but his hands clenched. The chamber's readings shot up as the simulation reached a new, critical intensity. Varric watched the probe, holding her breath as it fought against the brutal conditions. She could almost feel its struggle, the strain of each component as it defied forces designed to destroy it. And then, against all odds, the probe held. The readings leveled out, and the probe remained intact, its systems resilient under pressure that would have shattered previous models. Dr. Chen let out a slow, triumphant exhale. We did it. The probe survived. The lab filled with applause and congratulations. Varric felt a swell of pride, a warmth that settled in her chest as she realized that, for the first time, she was part of this victory. She had witnessed not only their success but the heart that drove it, and something within her shifted. Dr. Chen approached, a grin on her face. Looks like we'll have a working probe for Venus after all. We're one step closer to exploring the extremes of our own solar system. Varric turned to her, a question forming in her mind. And what then? When you reach those extremes, what will you do? Dr. Chen's smile softened, but her eyes held that spark of unyielding determination. Then we look to the next challenge. To other stars, other worlds, places we can't even imagine yet. We don't stop, Varric. We never stop. Varric felt a strange exhilaration at those words. Earth's people were more than just survivors. They were seekers, pushing beyond limits she had thought impossible. Their courage, their relentless pursuit of knowledge and growth, had revealed a strength within her own heart she hadn't known existed. As the scientists dispersed, Ethan turned to her, his gaze warm. You know, Varric, it's okay if this feels strange to you. For us, there's always a first time failing, first time trying again. You're part of this now. She looked at him, her voice steady and resolved. I understand that now, and I want to be part of it, to face challenges and push beyond them. Perhaps that's the real strength of this world. Not just surviving, but thriving in the unknown. Ethan smiled, extending a hand. Then welcome, officially, to humanity's greatest endeavor, the endless frontier. She took his hand, feeling a sense of purpose unlike any she'd known. As she looked back at the planet spinning beneath them, she realized that Earth was no longer a death world in her eyes. It was a world alive with possibilities, with challenges that could be faced head-on. And as the stars spread out before them, Varric felt ready to embrace this strange new path, to join in humanity's journey to the farthest reaches of existence, and to push the boundaries of what she'd thought possible. The universe, vast and uncharted, awaited. And for the first time, Varric felt eager to meet it, not as an observer, but as a part of its endless, awe-inspiring story.